1. Smart children often build their identity around intelligence, and the cost they pay as adults from a very young age. Many children receive special attention from adults because of their outstanding cognitive abilities, quick learning, or sharp memory. When a child answers a difficult question correctly, learns faster than peers, or shows early understanding, they are often praised with comments like, "You're so smart," "You're a little genius," or "You're amazing, you didn't even have to try." While these compliments come from love and pride, they unintentionally plant a very dangerous psychological seed. The child begins to believe that their worth is tied to their intelligence, that they must always be right, always excel, and that being smart is what defines who they are. When intelligence becomes identity, a child who hears, "You're smart," often enough starts to form an identity that says, "I am a smart person, and because I'm smart, things should always be easy for me." On the surface, this might look like confidence, but underneath, it's a fragile identity waiting to crumble, because intelligence isn't fixed. Everyone eventually faces challenges beyond their abilities. Real growth requires not just talent, but also effort, resilience, and the ability to fail and bounce back. However, once a child's identity is fused with their intellect, they begin to avoid any situation that might challenge that identity. If I'm smart, things should be easy. This is the harmful belief that forms from praise focused only on intelligence. The child no longer sees effort or learning as normal parts of life, but as signs of inadequacy. They begin to think, "If I have to study too hard, maybe I'm not that smart. If I fail, maybe I'm not as good as they say. If I have to try, maybe I'm not naturally gifted." This belief quietly paralyzes growth. The child will start choosing only what they're already good at, sticking to easy wins, to protect their smart kid image. Instead of exploring, learning, and pushing their limits, they shrink their comfort zone. They fear failure, avoid new challenges, and give up easily when things get tough. Avoiding failure and the talented procrastinator syndrome. As they grow up, these children, now adults, often struggle with starting anything new. They procrastinate on important projects out of fear they won't do them well. They have big ideas, potential, even skills, but they hesitate to act, terrified that trying might expose them as not so smart after all. They may write out elaborate plans in their heads but can't bring themselves to execute. Because if they try and fail, it's not just failure, it's a blow to their very identity. "Maybe I'm not who I thought I was." This kind of person often suffers from hidden anxiety, deep self-doubt, and the pressure to always appear excellent. As a result, many feel disconnected, lonely, and emotionally drained. The unfairness of praise. The sad truth is, smart children never asked to be labeled that way. They're just reacting to their environment. And when every form of recognition is tied to being smart rather than working hard, they lose the crucial life skills of perseverance and resilience, skills far more important than IQ in real-world success. Praising intelligence alone teaches kids to fear losing their reputation, to avoid mistakes, and to shy away from organic learning. Over time, the identity of smart kid becomes a burden they must carry and maintain, rather than a source of freedom. How do we unravel this false identity? The first and most important step is to recognize the problem. That maybe, for years, you've been living under a label of the smart one, but also feeling trapped by it. You don't need to abandon your intelligence, but you do need to rebuild a broader, healthier identity, one that gives you the freedom to try and fail, make mistakes and learn from them, start from zero without feeling unworthy, admit, "I don't know," without thinking it makes you any less valuable. Instead of saying, "I'm a smart person," try saying, "I'm a person who's willing to learn. I'm someone who steps outside my comfort zone. I'm someone who dares to be imperfect." That's the kind of identity that leads to growth, not just intellectual, but emotional and personal. Smart children deserve praise, but the way we praise them, and the identity we help them form, needs mindfulness. And if you were one of those children, now grown and still carrying the weight of that label, know this: it's never too late to begin again. Not to become smarter, but to become more authentic, more connected, and more fully human. Part 2, the negative impact in adulthood. When intelligence becomes a burden. When a child grows up constantly being praised for their intelligence, they often enter adulthood carrying a unique identity, the smart kid. But over time, what was once a source of pride becomes a heavy burden. It no longer motivates, it restricts. Instead of fueling growth, this identity becomes a barrier, especially when it comes to emotional maturity, social connection, and self-worth. As these once gifted children step into adult life, they begin facing problems they can't quite put into words. They feel disconnected, exhausted, and can't understand why. After all, they're supposed to be doing just fine. Feelings of isolation and loss of motivation. One of the most noticeable consequences is a deep sense of social isolation. As adults, people who once stood out for being smart often feel like they no longer belong. It's as if life is moving forward for everyone else, and they're just watching from the sidelines. On the surface, they may still seem successful, competent, and articulate, but inside, there's a growing feeling of being disconnected and out of sync. What makes it worse is that they can't pinpoint the cause. In theory, they have it all: intellect, skills, opportunities, but the motivation is gone. Everything feels heavy. They struggle to begin new tasks, procrastinate without reason, or lose interest in things they once loved. The root of this problem lies in their over-identification with being smart. They were taught, implicitly or explicitly, that their value came from doing things effortlessly. So when something requires real effort, it feels like a threat. If they try and fail, it's not just a minor setback, it challenges their entire sense of self. To avoid that pain, they play it safe, doing only what they're already good at, avoiding risks, and resisting growth. Over time, this leads to falling behind, both professionally and personally. Social interaction becomes exhausting. Another consequence is the difficulty in forming meaningful social connections. As kids, smart children may have stood out without much effort. They got praise and recognition for their academic performance or quick thinking. But adulthood demands a different skill set. In the real world, social connection, not intelligence, is the foundation of most relationships. The problem is, many smart kids never developed those social skills. They didn't learn how to build emotional bonds, to listen, to relate. Instead, they observed and analyzed. They learned how to understand people intellectually, but not emotionally. They approach relationships like puzzles to solve, not experiences to share. As a result, social interaction becomes draining. Instead of being present in conversations, they're constantly running mental simulations. What are they thinking? What should I say next? Did that sound awkward? They're not engaging with others, they're performing. This constant overthinking leads to social fatigue and even more disconnection, pushing them further into isolation. Defensive arrogance, the mask that hides loneliness. Perhaps the most dangerous result of this disconnection is the development of something called defensive arrogance. This isn't real arrogance, it's a shield. When someone feels alienated, misunderstood, or unable to fit in, they may protect themselves with a story. I don't connect with others because I'm deeper than them. I'm different. I don't have close friends because most people are too shallow. I don't belong here because I'm more thoughtful, more intelligent. These thoughts sound like confidence, but they're really a defense mechanism against loneliness. They help cushion the pain of rejection by reframing isolation as superiority. But in reality, it's a trap. The more someone convinces themselves they're above others, the harder it becomes to reach out or accept help. Slowly, they build walls that not only keep others out but also keep them locked inside. This defensive arrogance reinforces the cycle of disconnection. Even when they crave closeness, the mask of superiority keeps them from making the vulnerable choices needed to connect. And that's the paradox. They want to be seen, understood, loved, but the very persona they've built to feel safe is the one that pushes people away. Conclusion: time to disarm and truly connect. We often assume intelligence can solve all problems, but feelings of emptiness, disconnection, and emotional pain aren't logic problems, they're human experiences, and they require vulnerability, presence, and connection, not calculation. If you were once the smart kid, and now find yourself lost in the adult world, feeling like you no longer fit, you're not alone. Millions of people feel the same, and the first step to healing isn't becoming smarter, it's allowing yourself to be more human. Say, I don't know, try something new, even if you might fail. Love, even if it might hurt. Show up, not as someone impressive, but as someone real. Because only then can you find what intelligence alone can't give you, genuine connection and a sense of belonging. Part 3. Intelligence doesn't solve emotional pain. When the mind becomes a wall against the heart, there's something many intelligent people experience but rarely speak about. A deep sense of emptiness, loneliness, and confusion about why they feel that way. From a young age, they're praised as smart, sharp, quick. They learn faster, solve problems better, and know how to please teachers and parents. But as they grow up, life isn't just about math, essays, or getting A's. Life is messy emotions, complex relationships, moments of uncertainty, and long nights wondering, am I enough? And that's when intelligence stops being helpful in the way it used to be. Logic can't heal emotional pain. Smart people tend to do something very specific. They analyze. When they face a problem, they automatically dissect it. They look for causes, consequences, and logical solutions. When they're sad, they ask, why am I sad? How do I stop feeling this way? When they feel lonely, they rationalize, maybe I'm different from others, maybe I'm too deep for superficial relationships. On the surface, this seems smart and productive. But the truth is, emotions are not problems to be solved. They're experiences to be felt. You can't analyze sadness away. You can't logic your way out of loneliness. And you certainly can't solve the question, am I good enough, with reasoning. Because that question, am I enough? Is not a logical one. It can only be answered through emotional connection, validation, and vulnerability. The smarter you are, the lonelier you might feel. Ironically, intelligence can lead to deeper loneliness. When you're the smartest kid in the class or always the fastest thinker in the room, you get used to not being like the others. You get used to being the one who gets it faster, who's more thoughtful or insightful. And slowly, you begin to feel a distance, a subtle wall between you and the rest of the world. You join conversations but feel like you're pretending to care. You smile at the right moments, say the right things, but you feel disconnected. Because deep down, you're performing, not connecting. You're running mental simulations, not emotionally showing up. And when loneliness becomes undeniable, you build another layer of defense. I'm just different. I don't connect because they're not as deep. I don't belong here. These thoughts sound like confidence, but they're actually wounded pride in disguise. It's how a brilliant mind protects a vulnerable heart. Why analysis isn't the answer. One of the most common mistakes smart people make is believing that if I can understand my feelings, they'll stop hurting. But the reality is, understanding doesn't erase pain, only experiencing it fully does. Sadness wants to be felt, not dissected. Loneliness needs to be shared, not explained away. Hurt needs to be acknowledged, not hidden behind logic. You can list 10 reasons why you shouldn't feel bad, and still feel awful. You can read 100 psychology books, listen to hours of self-help podcasts, and still feel empty. Because knowledge doesn't replace emotional nourishment. Emotions are the heart's language. And if you're always trying to live life through your brain, you're starving your heart. The question, am I enough? Has no logical answer. This is one of the most painful, recurring questions smart adults face, especially those who were praised for being exceptional as kids. As they grow older and start to struggle, stumble, or simply become average in a world full of other brilliant people, they begin to doubt their worth. Am I still on the right path? Do I still matter? Am I still special? They chase answers in achievements, degrees, and approval. They work endlessly, not out of passion, but to prove themselves to others and to themselves. And still, that emptiness remains, because emotional pain cannot be cured with facts, strategies, or accolades. The question, am I enough, doesn't need an answer in words, it needs an emotional experience. A loving gaze, an unconditional hug, a moment where you're seen, not for your brilliance, but for your being. Intelligence is a tool, not an identity. The problem isn't that you're smart. The problem is that you've learned to use intelligence as a shield, a way to control feelings. You've allowed the mind to take over so completely that it's now a barrier between you and your real emotions. Intelligence is an amazing tool for solving external problems, school, work, puzzles. But when it comes to inner wounds, emotional needs, the desire to be loved, intellect can't help much. That's the domain of presence, courage, and connection. You can't think your way out of pain. You have to feel your way through it. You have to sit with it, stay with it, and let it transform you from within. You don't need answers. You need connection. You don't need someone to explain why you feel this way. You need someone who simply says, I'm here. You don't need a logical reason to feel okay. You need an emotional moment that reminds you, you're okay, even if you're not perfect. You don't need to be good enough by the world's standards. You just need to show up as you are, whole, messy, uncertain, real. And when you do that, little by little, the pain begins to ease. Not because you figured it all out, but because you finally let yourself be human. Part 4. Toward authentic connection, showing up is enough. There's a common belief that many smart children grow up with, a belief that sounds innocent at first but quietly shapes the way they see themselves and others. I have to be excellent to be loved. I have to stand out to be accepted. I have to be special to belong. This belief doesn't come from malice. It often starts with simple, well-meaning compliments. You're so smart. You're better than the others. You're the pride of the family. Children, being emotionally honest and eager to belong, absorb these messages. They begin to build an internal condition for being loved. Be smart. Be the best. Don't make mistakes. And so begins the role play, the identity of the gifted child. At first, it provides safety and validation. But as life becomes more complex, when we need more than just intelligence to thrive, when we crave closeness, vulnerability, and being seen fully, that identity begins to feel like a trap. You don't have to be impressive to belong. One of the most important awakenings in adult life is this: you don't have to be excellent to be loved. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room to be allowed in. You don't have to prove your worth to take up space. You just need to show up. To show up means to be present, fully present. Even when you're tired, confused, lost, or unsure of who you are, you still deserve connection. You still have the right to sit down in the room, take a breath, and say, I'm not perfect, but I'm here. And strangely, that is exactly what allows others to finally see you. Real connection begins when we stop performing. A lot of intelligent people grow up thinking that human relationships are puzzles to be solved. They analyze conversations, decode emotions, and try to predict behavior, all through the lens of intellect. They become great observers, great explainers, but poor feelers. And that's the biggest barrier to real connection, because you can't hug someone with logic. You can't love someone by analyzing them. You can't heal your pain by solving it like an equation. Real connection begins when we let go of the performance. When we allow people to see what's really happening inside, without a script, without a filter, without trying to look like we've got it all together. It begins when you say, I'm hurting, and I don't know what to do. When you admit, I feel lost, but I want to feel close to someone. Not because you're strong, but because you're brave enough to be soft. The greatest courage isn't in achievement, it's in honest presence. We often think of courage as stepping onto a stage, leading the way, doing something extraordinary. But sometimes, the most powerful courage is much simpler. It's staying in the room when you feel like running away. Courage is answering honestly when someone asks, "Are you okay?" Courage is texting an old friend, "I miss you." Courage is looking in the mirror and saying, "I'm not perfect, but I'm still worthy." Honest presence requires you to accept your own fragility, and that's where true connection lives, connection with others, and even deeper, connection with yourself. You are worthy of love, even when you haven't earned it. This may be one of the hardest truths for high-achieving minds to accept. You are worthy of love not because of what you do, but simply because you exist. For those who grew up tying self-worth to success, this feels absurd. How can I be loved when I haven't done anything meaningful? When I'm failing? When I'm a mess, lost, and not nearly as capable as I once was? But here's the paradox. When you've run out of things to prove, that's the moment you're most available to be loved unconditionally. Not because you've become someone, but because you've stopped hiding. Connection doesn't require perfection, it requires honesty. You can start piecing yourself back together not by getting smarter, but by getting more honest. Speak, even when your voice shakes. Reach out, even when your hands tremble. Be present, even when your heart feels broken. People don't need you to be flawless, they need you to be true. They don't need you to always be happy, they need you to show up, even when you're grieving, confused, or unsure. Because only when you're real can others reach the real you. True connection begins within. Before you can connect honestly with others, you have to learn to connect with yourself. Sit with your pain, without trying to fix it. Listen to that quiet voice inside you, instead of forcing strength. Forgive yourself for the times you were scared, lost, or desperate for approval. Healing doesn't come from self-improvement. It comes from self-acceptance. Love doesn't grow because you became good enough. It grows when you finally say, "This is me, and even if I'm a little messy, I'm still worth loving." Final thoughts. Connection doesn't come from the head, it comes from the heart. If you've spent your whole life building an identity around being smart, if you've withdrawn because you believed you were different, if you've been chasing belonging through performance, then maybe it's time to lay that burden down. No one needs you to be perfect in order to love you. No one loves you because you always get it right. People love you when you're willing to be real. When you say, "I feel just as lost as you," when you smile gently and take a step forward, even if you're trembling, that's when connection happens. Not because you impressed anyone, but because you showed up. Connection doesn't start with, "What do I bring to the table?" It starts with, "Can I allow myself to be here, even when I feel unsure?" Because in the end, it's not your perfection that makes you lovable. It's your humanness. It's your honesty. It's your willingness to sit in the messy middle and say, "I'm here, and I want to belong," not as a star, but as a person. That's when the wall between you and others begins to dissolve. That's when your inner voice stops shouting, "Be more," and starts whispering, "You are already enough." Real connection doesn't happen in the spotlight, it happens in the quiet, not on the pedestal, but on the ground, where the rest of us live. And the moment you step down and join us, you'll realize it's not such a bad place to be. In fact, it might be the only place you can finally feel at home. Part 5, Rebuilding Yourself on Growth, Not Intelligence. There's a truth that many smart people don't realize until adulthood. Intelligence is not a solid foundation to build your identity on. It's a tool, a gift, but not the core of who you are. What truly matters is not how smart you are, but whether you're willing to grow. Letting go of the smart kid identity. Many people grow up wearing the label of the smart kid without realizing that this very label becomes an invisible prison. From a young age, you might have been praised for solving problems quickly, reading early, or being more advanced than your peers. And over time, your intelligence became your identity, something you clung to, something that defined your value. But here's the trap. When you tie your self-worth to your intelligence, you begin to fear anything you're not good at. You avoid challenges, steer clear of failure, and slowly shrink your world down to what feels safe and effortless. You don't dare to be bad at something, don't dare to start from scratch, because you're afraid you won't be special anymore. The solution? You have to let go of that identity. This doesn't mean denying your intelligence. It means refusing to let it define your entire existence. You are no longer just the smart kid. You are a human being who's constantly learning, evolving, and growing. Dare to be wrong, dare to fail, dare to challenge yourself. It's easy to say, but incredibly hard to do, because making mistakes touches the deepest fear, the fear of no longer being exceptional. But if you want to grow, you must learn to fail without hating yourself. You must learn to be wrong without feeling ashamed. You must learn to start over without feeling small. Here's the strange truth. You only truly begin to learn when you allow yourself to fail. When you try a new sport that you're not good at, apply for a job that scares you, or fall in love even if it might hurt, you are finally, truly, living. Growth doesn't come from perfection. It comes from the cycle of trial, error, learning, and persistence. Every mistake becomes a building block in the new version of yourself, not the one who must always appear smart, but the one who is brave. Accepting yourself as an ordinary human. When you let go of the pressure to be exceptional, you'll discover something beautiful. You don't have to be extraordinary to live a meaningful life. You're allowed to be ordinary, and still deserve love, respect, and joy. Because people aren't measured by their IQ, their grades, or how impressive they seem. People are measured by their honesty, their resilience, their kindness, and their humility. You're allowed to learn slowly. You're allowed to not have everything figured out. You're allowed to feel lost. You're allowed to start over. You're allowed to be nobody special for a while, as long as you're being true to yourself. And in that ordinariness lies your truest strength, the foundation for an honest life, not one built to shine, but one built to connect. Life to grow, not to impress. When you shift your mindset from proving you're smart to being open to growth, everything changes. You learn because you're curious, not because you want perfect grades. You work because you want to contribute, not just to earn praise. You live to feel and experience, not to impress anyone. You begin asking different questions, not, how do I look smart? But, what will help me grow today? Not, what do others think of me? But, am I being honest with myself right now? And in that shift, you'll realize, intelligence no longer sits at the center of your life. Instead, values like growth, connection, and compassion begin to lead the way. Life lesson and call to action. If you've ever felt stuck in your smart kid identity, if you've felt lost, numb, or unmotivated, if you've grown tired of always trying to be impressive, then this is your invitation. Let go. Let go of the pressure to be smart. Let go of the need to be exceptional, and begin again, from the most honest place inside you. Start by taking one small risk. Try something you've always been afraid to try. Share something you've always hidden. Face something you've always avoided. And if you stumble? Wonderful, that means you're learning. Don't let your intelligence become the wall between you and your full life. Start living as a human being who learns, grows, connects, and stumbles. Because when you live like that, not only will you become more fulfilled, but you'll also inspire others to live more honestly too. If this message resonated with you, if it touched something deep inside you, please consider supporting this journey. Red heart, hit the like button to help this message reach more people. Bell, subscribe to the YouTube channel to explore more deep, soulful content about psychology, personal growth, and healing. Speech balloon and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. I'd love to hear your story. Thank you for reading all the way to the end. And remember, you don't need to be extraordinary to be worthy of love. You just need to show up, as you are. See you in the next video. Let's keep healing, one step at a time, together. Thank you for listening English podcast.